With the fall of Philadelphia in September of 1777, George Washington sent the fewest soldiers he could spare to Fort Mifflin, right under Delaware. They were charged with holding the British off to the last man, so that General Washington and his exhausted troops could make it to the winter encampment at Valley Forge. To commemorate this unbelievable moment, I'm making a spectacular first dish, which is a shrimp and rutabaga fricassee, followed by corn fritters, or you call it hush puppies, and then a one-of-a-kind fried striped bass with an okra stew. 1777 was a harsh winter, and the serving of this meal, all for a taste of history. For our first dish, we're going to make a shrimp and rutabaga fricassee. If I would grade this recipe by the degree of difficulty, this would be on top of the list. You have to pre-blend because rutabaga is really dry by comparison to other vegetables. It takes a lot, it's really firm. Once the rutabaga gets picked, it gets covered with beeswax to preserve it, and it literally will live in a root cellar the entire winter long. So to make this recipe, I had to get a head start. And the head start is that I had to turn what we call, in professional language, turning the vegetable. I peeled it, cut the rutabaga in like a wedge like so. Take a paring knife. I'm sure you could just cut it like that and the flavor would be the same. But since this recipe we're making today would have been served at royalties, not the common man, we might as well follow through all the way. It's called turning. French word, tourner, means you give it shape. Obviously, a question I get asked all the time, what happens to the trimmings? Well, they don't get thrown away, that comes into a soup. Behind me, I already have the rutabaga in my water with just a little bit of salt. The rutabaga will take about at least 10 to 15 minutes at a pretty good boil. Shrimp in the 18th century did not come frozen. We don't have any freezers except in the wintertime. So shrimp would have been cut like that, head on. I clean the shrimps ahead of time and put off the head like here and then later take off your skin. Very simple. So this is very easy. We make a little shrimp stock, which is really nothing to it. And the shrimp shells in a pot, a little bit of water on top, and then we add a little bit what we call the white murra, which is onion, leek, a bunch of bay leaves in here, and throw this into the stock. I don't salt it. The finished sauce will be salted. You'll find recipes, if you're trying to remake this recipe, that uses shallots. I don't like shallots on this one, they're too sweet for me. Regular onion, chop them fine. So now I have the butter, small quarter of a stick, something like that. And like I said, I don't want to get too much heat in there. Make it a little bit translucent. And I'm going to want low heat, I don't want too much heat on there. Shrimp are very delicate. In many places you find them, they get overcooked completely. Proper shrimp should just be opaque, not more cooked than that. So now they're kind of simmering like that, how I want it. I'll take some anchovies, chop the anchovies up. In the 18th century, there was a lot of cooking with anchovies done. Now, when you cook with anchovies, you want to be very careful with the salt in the end. So I put it right into my shrimp right now. Put my nutmeg in it now. You see how neatly they cook, very slow. This is exactly how you want them. See how nice? Just a little ladle of the shrimp stock. Shrimp stock is already done. This is how you want them, just like that. I cook that in a very slow fire, so I can just put a little saffron over it now and it will come beautiful. As I mentioned, this dish comes together quickly once the rutabagas are blanched. You don't want to overcook them either, but this is just perfect. All it needs now is some chives I put it with there, later do the seasoning, and then comes the three most important things. Our ketchup, a little bit of sherry, you could also use white wine. Sherry just gets a good flavor to it. And most important thing, heavy cream. Let it sit, don't disturb it for a little bit. Chop some chives, cut up a Lemon, by the way, lemons did not grow in this country until the 1850s. So every time this recipe was made, and well-to-do homes, the lemon came from civil Spain. A little bit of lemon, just squeeze in, a little bit, not much. I don't like to cut herbs, but for this recipe, I put chives twice. Chive inside the recipe and on top. But the most important thing, I guess, that flavor is the tarragon. And the tarragon, I just pull the leaves. As you know, every recipe I make on the show, I experiment with it. And when I made it a couple of times, because the rutabaga is kind of sweet but dull, not too much flavor. The shrimp itself, too much flavor. Yes, you have the anchovy. Yes, you have the ketchup, but it needs a little something. What I did, I put a little bit of the pepper flakes over. It may be something they had or didn't have, except Thomas Jefferson, that we know grew a huge variety of all kind of peppers. I got to get a quick taste. I want to make sure that everything is in harmony. And let me see this really quick. Oh, is it ever in harmony? My shrimp and rutabaga fricassee. Don't be intimidated with this dish. Make it, and I guarantee you, you're going to like it.
Just south of Philadelphia, on the banks of the Delaware River, Fort Mifflin would play a pivotal role in the war for America's independence.
Strategically, this would sound like a great location, but this patch of land that they picked to build this fort was called Mud Island, and as you can imagine, that's not a good place to build much of anything, let alone a military fortification.
Today, stone and wooden remnants are a steadfast tribute to the historic battle that raged here in November of 1777. Construction of the fort on Mud Island, as it was called at the time, began at the request of Pennsylvania Governor John Penn, with British Royal Engineers actually building the first phase.
John Montresor began construction of the fort in 1771 in a surprisingly modern predicament. He was given an insufficient budget to build a fortification on a muddy patch of land. John Montresor departed in 1772 in disgust, leaving the western wall unfinished. The fort was essentially unoccupied for many years, but was in the hands of the Committee of Safety in advance of the American Revolution.
In 1776, political pressure between Britain and the colonies was reaching a tipping point. Benjamin Franklin, as head of Philadelphia's Safety Committee, urged for the completion of the fort to help defend the city. General Thomas Mifflin was chosen to oversee the fort's construction.
In the fall of 1777, George Washington had been defeated at the battles of Paoli, Brandywine, and Germantown. The British had gone on and occupied Philadelphia, and Washington needed the time to get his troops to winter quarters in Valley Forge.
Meanwhile, the British were very anxious to pursue him, so Washington orders the small garrison at Fort Mifflin to hold to the last extremity.
Next on our exciting menu today, we make a corn fritter or hush puppy. Now, there's many things you can put under. Basically, it's a straightforward half and half cornmeal and all-purpose flour with buttermilk, a couple eggs, a little baking powder, salt, and sugar. So to make the corn fritter is so simple. It's equal parts. So you have cornmeal, a nice cornmeal. You have nice all-purpose flour. I recommend that you mix it good. Now, when you go to the store, you can find this already pre-mixed. 2 eggs, and as I always say, crack them in a bowl to make sure that nothing happens to it. I have a couple tablespoons of buttermilk, baking powder, 1 teaspoon. I have sugar, salt to the pinch. Good amount of green onion in there, but only the green. You don't want to get down to the white. Anything else you want to incorporate, literally bacon, shrimp, ham, because the cornmeal is so forgiving and it will bind everything into it. So when you see some places where they call it bacon corn fritters, if you make bacon corn fritters, obviously you want to cook the bacon first, crispy, and then chop it down. It's almost impossible to not get this recipe right. And you just mix it up and let it sit up for a little bit. Look how beautiful it looks. And I like mine to make them really unorthodox. And you can make them smaller, you can make them bigger, but the trick is your temperature and the oil. Because if you make it too hot, it'll be brown on the outside and completely raw on the inside. When you put them in, they should start floating. As you see here, it's absolutely perfect. They float up to the top. You want to cook them, like I said, at a low fire. Let me get my skimmer and turn them over. Look how nice they are. Obviously, the baking powder that's in there, together with the egg, look at it, how beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful they cook up. Like so many times when I make my recipes, I say don't rush it, because if you rush it, it'll be ruined. So you want to keep the temperature right. And remember, I'm cooking on open fire, so a lot is with the eye and a lot is by touch and feeling. I don't know about you, but to me, this dish speaks for itself. Isn't it beautiful?
Washington orders the small garrison at Fort Mifflin to hold to the last extremity.
And by doing this, it made it very difficult for the British to operate. Literally, they were starting to starve because they couldn't bring the supplies up the river.
The British sent an armada of nearly 250 warships north on the Delaware River to resupply their occupying troops. For 5 weeks, the British tried unsuccessfully to get past Forts Mifflin and Mercer.
Fort Mifflin and the sister fort across the river, Fort Mercer, are holding out against an unimaginable show of force far longer than anyone anticipated.
Beyond bombardments from warships and floating cannon batteries, they endured land mortar fire and faced over 2,000 British soldiers.
Fort Mifflin and Fort Mercer are aided in the defense of Philadelphia by a series of underwater obstacles.
They had sunk chevaux de frise, which is a large box containing what looks like telephone poles with metal caps on the end. When a ship would go over one of these, it would puncture a hole in the ship.
Mother Nature provided the frustrated British forces with a solution to get past this unfortunate obstacle. Weeks of rain flooded the island.
The British ultimately are able to sail 2 warships, the Vigilant and the Fury, up the back channel behind Fort Mifflin and bombard the fort at point-blank range. Fort Mifflin at this time has only 10 working cannon. They're running out of ammunition, they're running out of black powder. The garrison is reduced to being offered an extra gill or ration of rum for every soldier who could retrieve an incoming cannonball that fit one of the fort's working guns to be returned to the British.
Fire!
They were greatly outnumbered and lacked the munitions necessary to defend themselves. They abandoned Fort Mifflin, but in one final act of defiance, they set the decimated fort ablaze and raised the American flag. Fort Mifflin never surrendered.
So now I'm going to get started for the main course, which is fried striped bass that is topped with a very unique okra potato topping. And okra, by the way, has been around for a long time. Recently becoming very woke because it's really one of the great superfoods, really healthy for you. Okra in many English-speaking countries were called ladyfingers because it kind of looks like a ladyfinger. However, in British North America and in America, it's called okra. So to make that, it's really simple. The only one tricky part on it, if you can find brown flour, you got to make your own brown flour. And the way you do that is take all-purpose flour, stick it in a very cold, low oven, maybe 200 degrees until it gets nice and golden brown. This gives you this great flavor. Right now, I have some schmaltz and I have some oil, and I got a Dutchie getting hot. Schmaltz first, and the reason we need a good amount of schmaltz and oil in there is because you want to get the flavor into the okra. I already chopped the onion coarse, minced the garlic, and just put it right in the pan. That I want to give a little color to it. Many times I just tell you to keep it translucent. Here I want it lightly colored, not a lot of color. Looks beautiful. Oh. But the brown flour goes in and we make like a quick roux. Now, remember when you cook 18th century style, and I don't have a stove I can control like that, I reverse the cooking process. In other words, I welded down the lard and the oil and the onions and bring it over here. Now I have my brown flour in there. I'm going to deglaze it, a little bit of sherry, and then just a little bit of vegetable stock or water. Now I'm going to add in the okra, chopped it up already. I'm going to put the okra back on the fire and let it blanch, in other words, until the okra gets soft. Bay leaf, I can put in there now, and I'll put it back on the fire. You want to be careful because the okra has a lot of liquids and it's soft. I'm just going to do a little bit of my pepper flakes around. Let me get the lid, lidding it, and the fire it goes. In the meantime, we're going to get ready to prep our fish. When I fry fish, one of the things that I learned from my many travels in the Caribbean, it's a nice way of doing it when you season your flour. So all I have is all-purpose flour with some cornstarch on it. So it's flour and cornstarch. I have white pepper. Depends how hot you want it. I have salt. Then I have nutmeg. So when I deep layer my pieces of fish in there, they're all evenly done, rather than taking this piece of fish and put a seasoning on it. Much easier to work this way. With all the research I have done, and a lot of colleagues that are historians, we found that the striped bass was one of the fishes that would come all the way up because it doesn't mind the warm water. This one over here is about 25 pounds. Before I attack him right now and butcher him, I have to add in the potatoes that I pre-blanched because the okra is ready. Really beautiful. So now we're going to take this guy, lay him to the side. We're going to cut through here, then we're going to go in here, and we're going to follow the fish natural spine all the way down. There we go. This is my lunch tomorrow. You want to trim down the outer side. Now, if you know what you're doing, you don't have any bones in it. If you have bones, they would be on the end, which I don't have any, but I want to get it nice and clean. This particular recipe wants the skin on it. But you want to make sure that you have no scales on there, because the scale you couldn't eat. Now, it depends how big the portion you want to serve. It obviously depends how you're going to slice it. So today, we're just going to make pieces like so, would be perfect. Look at that, beautiful. I explained you how I do my seasoned flour. All I do is my fish in there. And now we go over to the oil that is properly tempered, and we want to shake off the excess flour. When cooking with oil, you're going to make sure the temperature is right. You don't want to have it too hot. It would be burned the outside and raw on the inside. So you want to cook that nicely until it gets completely, beautifully crisp and golden brown on the outside. The fish itself won't take long. Bring my okra and potato stew over to the table. Now I got some lemon slice I want to put on top. Remember, again, lemon didn't grow in this country until the 1850s. So every single lemon made it in actually to the harbor of Philadelphia via the Delaware where we caught this fish from. How's that? Sprig of parsley. So the main course today is a tribute to the hard-working soldiers of Fort Mifflin and Fort Mercer. Spectacular. In case you haven't noticed, whenever I have an opportunity to play tribute to my 18th century hero, Thomas Jefferson, I do so. This dish particular is one that he fell in love with in traveling to the south of France. He grew it, he made beautiful fennel salads, and this one happens to be one of my great dishes, which is a baked fennel. And the way you do that is very simple. Obviously, fennel you get everywhere. It's great eaten as a salad, but it's also fantastic when you eat it as a vegetable, like I'm doing. So all you want to do, just cut the bottom off. If there's any outer leaves that are blemished, take them off. You take the top and you penetrate it, like make a cross into it, like so. Not all the way, just up to here, so that the fennel still holds together. We're going to take the fennel and stick it in a blanch a little bit. And all I have is water and salt. And just stick them in there. There we go. And now you let them blanch at a rolling boil and take maybe 8 minutes or so, because you want to make sure that it's blanched all the way through, but it has to be firm enough. I have a roasting pan. Put a little bit of oil on the bottom. Not much, a little bit of oil, just to make sure it doesn't stick up. And what happens also when you poach it, the fennel opens up like a beautiful flower, as you see. So now I got a little bit of pepper flake. Remember, Thomas Jefferson liked everything nice and seasoned. A little ghost pepper on top. A little bit of salt. Good amount of cheese. All right. Paprika on top. Now it goes in the oven at maybe 3 1/4 for maybe 8 minutes. But you got to make sure that the fennel is blanched enough, and then it just overbakes it. Take some of the fennel greens from the top and just add them in for a beautiful little presentation. Now take it and stick it on my serving tray. A little extra virgin olive oil. I'm just going to do a little bit of my pepper flakes around for color. It's easy to make, it's colorful, it's beautiful, and it's very healthy on top of it. The fearless effort of the soldiers at Fort Mifflin and at Fort Mercer in protecting the Delaware and Philadelphia cannot be denied. And their impact on the Revolutionary War should never be forgotten.